The galaxy knew her as a god of ruin, a conqueror who razed entire systems before breakfast. Empires collapsed at the mention of her name, but on this day, in the warship chamber where judgment was carved into titanium, she didn't speak. Because the human janitor, bare hands cradling her sleeping child, had just done something that no one in the galaxy had ever dared. Before we dive in, let us know where in the stars you're watching from, sector, city, or system. And if stories like this one stir something quiet in you, something you forgot was still alive, hit that subscribe button. Because tomorrow's story might just teach you what strength really looks like. The war chamber aboard the dreadnought. Zereth Ultima was not designed to hold softness. Every wall was lined with judgment, every console a ledger of annihilation. The floor itself was alloyed with the blood of the Overlord's enemies, bonded into obsidian, so dark it refused to reflect. This was where armadas knelt, where treaties burned, where worlds were sentenced without appeal. No one whispered here, no one cried, which is why the sound, a thin, warbling cry that rose like a bird trapped behind steel, cut through the air like it didn't belong. Cole didn't mean to hear it. He was halfway through his shift, shoulders aching from hauling fusion waste tanks down corridor after corridor. His mop, jury-rigged from human parts and alien adhesives, squeaked softly against the polished floor, his boots leaving ghost marks he'd learned to erase before anyone important noticed. He didn't look up when the Threxian guards walked past. He didn't breathe too loud when they did. You learn, after years cleaning rooms no one wants you in, how to become less than invisible. But the sound kept going. It wasn't an alarm, not the AI-pitched shriek of reactor failure, not the steel grind of a ship under stress. This was something else, alive, fragile, desperate. It pulsed like a heartbeat trying to remember itself. He paused, mop halfway through a streak, and tilted his head toward the corridor no one used unless they had a death wish. A hatch blinked red, a flickering failure. And beneath it, the sound again quieter now, like the voice had grown tired. He should have left it. That's what the rules were. You find something strange, you log it and move on. But Cole hadn't followed every rule since the day he lost her. Since the day he'd cradled his own daughter in a hospital back on Earth. One that hadn't bothered to filter its air or check its power backups. So he followed it. The corridor dipped into blue shadows, walls breathing with silent tech. He walked slowly, keeping his back to the wall, one hand on the mop handle like it was anything more than wood and glue. The chamber it led to wasn't marked, just a plain pressure door, misaligned by half an inch. He pushed it open. Inside, silence. Cold. A soft light from the ceiling, barely enough to illuminate the sharp edges of control panels and comm slabs, and a table that looked more like a dissecting altar than furniture. And there, tucked into a tangle of wires and discarded armor plating, was a child, purple skinned with cyan ridges along her arms, tiny claws twitching, breathing fast, crying, barely. Cole knelt before he even realized he had. His mop clattered to the floor. He reached forward, hands trembling not with fear, but something older, something deeper. She looked up at him with eyes like a newborn storm, and as he lifted her carefully into his arms, the cry stopped. Just outside the chamber, the security feed blinked once, recorded the moment, and sent it unintentionally directly to the Empress. She weighed less than memory, but more than forgiveness. Her skin was warm in his arms, radiating that soft, humming heat newborns have, the kind that makes you forget everything you thought was important. Cole sat back on his heels, staring into her tiny face, half expecting her to dissolve into light. But she didn't. She whimpered once, then nestled into the crook of his neck like she belonged there. He blinked hard. His mouth opened, but no words came. What would you even say to a child born into this kind of place, to a baby left in a room filled with weapons and silence? The chair beside him was streaked with dried fluid, old plasma, maybe blood. Above them, a series of serrated blades were mounted ceremonially on the walls. This wasn't a nursery. It was a place of punishment. He looked around, scanning the corners for a trap, a camera. Some reason this moment wasn't what it felt like. But there was nothing, just her breathing, just her heartbeat fluttering against his chest like a message in Morse. He sat there longer than he should have, rocking side to side slightly, the way he remembered doing on hospital benches back home, back when the nights were loud and the future felt like a hallway you hadn't walked down yet. Then her tiny hand twitched. One of her fingers caught on the strap of his janitor harness and didn't let go. And that was when he noticed the glyph. It was faint, almost imperceptible, burned lightly into the cloth of the child's wrap. A tri-line pattern, one slash broken, one whole, one crossed with a tail. The last time he saw that symbol, it was on the datapad of a dying woman gasping through her final words about a custodian order. A story he'd half dismissed at the time, because grief makes stories grow faces. He looked down at the baby. Her skin shimmered faintly as the light adjusted. "You don't even know what they think you are," he whispered. The door behind him hissed. He turned. A guard, black-plated, crimson insignia. Threxian elite. Cole barely had time to blink. The guard stopped mid-step, weapon half raised. The baby was in full view now. Her tiny body curled against a man no one in the room had expected to be here, especially not holding her like she was sacred. "Step away," the guard barked, voice harsh through the translator. Cole didn't move, didn't flinch. "She was crying," he said quietly. "You didn't hear it? I said step." But the baby stirred. Her head lolled slightly. She yawned, claws retracting. Her glowing eyes fluttered halfway open and fixed directly on the guard. Something passed through the room like a pressure drop. The guard stumbled backward. "By the void," he muttered, then ran, not out of fear, but to alert someone whose arrival would change everything. He didn't know her name, not yet, but already Cole knew the shape of her breathing like he knew the rhythm of his own. She was asleep again, nestled against the fabric of his faded jumpsuit. One of her 4 fingers curled into the collar like it belonged there. The strange iridescent glow of her skin had dimmed into something soft moonlight over river stones. Whatever alien fury had birthed her, it wasn't present now. She was just a child. A quiet, perfect child. Cole didn't dare set her down. He couldn't. It wasn't just instinct, it was something deeper. Some nerve in his chest had reawakened, one that hadn't fired since the hospital back home, dimmed the lights and told him she didn't make it. His daughter, born too early, taken too soon. The way her hand twitched before she went quiet, it mirrored this baby's now. Like time had folded in on itself. The chamber was still. No alarms yet, no sirens. Just him, the child, and the echoes of his own pulse. He stood carefully, one hand supporting her back, the other cradling beneath her legs. His boots scuffed the polished floor as he turned. Behind him, the table's surface flickered with recent logs someone had accessed biodiagnostics. Not for torture, for care. Vital signs, nutrient levels, neural stabilization. Whoever left her here hadn't abandoned her. They were trying to hide her, and now he was holding the evidence. He heard the sound before he felt it. Boots, not one set, dozens, approaching fast, heavy, metallic, synchronized. Corridor protocol formation. The sound elite guards made when something sacred had been touched. Cole stepped back from the door. No plan, no weapon, just the baby. He adjusted her slightly, and she murmured in her sleep, tiny brow twitching. Her skin glowed a little brighter. The glyph shimmered faintly again. That strange sigil, one broken, one whole, one crossed with a tail. And then the doors exploded open. A line of guards entered in unison, weapons drawn, visors glowing. They froze, not at Cole, but at what he held. Because behind them, walking like a shadow made of silence, came the Empress, tall as prophecy, armor like polished ruin. Her presence bent gravity. Her eyes, not eyes at all, but twin wells of violet light locked instantly on the child. No one moved, not even the guards. She stepped forward, her cape whispering behind her like an executioner's vow. And then she stopped, not in confusion, not in fear, in recognition, because the human wasn't threatening her child. He was soothing her, and the baby. Her baby was asleep in his arms. The Empress tilted her head slightly, the blades in her pauldrons receding like petals. Her voice, when it came, was not thunder. It was wonder. "How did you get her to sleep?" Cole blinked, swallowed. "I didn't," he said. "She just let me." And for the first time in recorded galactic history, the most vicious overlord of the outer systems dropped her weapons. The Empress had walked through firestorms, torn through orbital citadels with her bare hands, and watched planetary monarchs beg for mercy she never granted. She had ordered the collapse of suns, smiled as oceans boiled, and turned diplomacy into a memory preserved only in ash. Her arrival always meant one thing: the end. But this was different. This time, when she stepped into the chamber, she wasn't greeted by silence enforced through fear, or bows stiffened by obligation. She was met by something her reign had never prepared her for. Stillness, unscripted, unarmored, raw, because the human, this janitor, this nothing, was standing in the center of her warship's sacred chamber with her daughter asleep against his chest, and he wasn't trembling, he wasn't bowing, he wasn't even speaking. He was just holding her, carefully, reverently, as if he'd been made for that moment. The Empress froze, not because she felt threatened. No, she had no natural predator. She froze because her mind, sharpened by endless war, couldn't categorize what she saw. Not weakness, not defiance, but something worse. Something harder to defeat. Peace. The baby stirred in the human's arms, one small hand reaching upward toward his chin, brushing it gently before falling again. That gesture broke something. Not in the room, in her. Behind her, the guards glanced at each other, expecting the order, the vaporization, the punishment. None came. She stepped forward. 1 pace. 2. Her boots echoed with ceremonial weight, but her voice, when she finally spoke, did not carry the command they feared. She should not be asleep, she said, eyes locked on the child. She hasn't slept since. Her voice faltered, flickered. She didn't finish the sentence. Couldn't. Cole didn't answer. He only shifted his feet, realigning her weight, protective without posturing, gentle without permission. He didn't know who this woman was, not really, but he knew a mother's ache when he saw one. He looked at her not with fear, but with something deeper. Understanding. She cried, he said quietly. So I picked her up. Then the Empress's eyes narrowed, the fire in them dimming for half a breath. And she didn't scream. She sighed, he said, like she'd been waiting for someone who wouldn't flinch. The Empress stood in silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, her shoulders dropped, her hands unclenched. The armor at her wrists dimmed. She took one more step, and just for a moment, the most feared being in the quadrant whose name was used to scare planetary children into obedience looked lost. She only does that when she feels safe, the Empress whispered. She hasn't. Since her father. Another unfinished sentence, but Cole heard it anyway. So did the baby, because in that moment, her small hand twitched again. Not toward the Empress, not toward the guards, toward him, the human. And that was when the war chamber, which had survived centuries of wrath and decree, held something it had never known: hope. The silence didn't last. It never does on ships built for dominance. The moment the Empress let her sentence trail off, the chamber behind her stirred like a nest of waking vipers. Counselors shifted in their cloaks of bone and silk. Generals bristled. Advisors whispered through neural threads laced into their skulls. The stillness was too much. They didn't trust it, and when the guards finally spoke, they did so with venom disguised as concern. This is a breach, one hissed, bowing just enough to be insulting. A human, unauthorized, unsanctioned, touching the air. Touching? Another echoed. He's cradling her like he belongs. The Empress didn't answer. She hadn't taken her eyes off her daughter. She didn't scream. She murmured again, more to herself than to them. She slept, but that wasn't enough. Not for the court. Not for the ones who had carved power from protocol. Then let the worm prove his worth, came a voice from the upper tier. High strategist Calyx, all silver armor and glimmering vanity. He stepped down slowly, each footfall a declaration of inherited cruelty. Let him undergo the trial. Gasps rippled. Even the guards flinched. The trial had not been invoked in a generation. Cole shifted the baby in his arms slightly, as if to shield her from the sound. What trial? He asked. Voice low, not afraid, just tired. Calyx's grin was sharp. The trial of humility. The right reserved for those who offend the chain of command. by pretending to be more than what they are. A few in the crowd laughed. A slow, sneering ripple. The Empress said nothing. Her silence was not permission, but it wasn't protest either. Two guards approached. Not rough, not yet. They held out their hands. "She must be returned to the stasis cradle," one said. Cole looked down at the baby, still asleep, still glowing. He hesitated. She stirred, sensing the distance widening. He kissed her forehead once, softly. A memory passed through his face of another cradle, another goodbye. He handed her over. The guards took her gently, almost reverently, and stepped away. Then they turned to him. "You will follow." He didn't ask where. He didn't ask why. He simply nodded once, as though this was just another mess to mop up. The room parted as he passed. Not with respect yet, but not with pure mockery either. Something quieter, something uncertain. Calix walked beside him like a shark near bleeding water. "The trial will be public," he said, "so the Empire remembers the chain." Cole didn't look at him, didn't speak. He was thinking of her, of the way she'd sighed, of how easily she'd trusted, of how nothing, not the guards, not the Empress, not the walls of titanium and blade, had made him feel more dangerous than the way that child had rested her head against his chest and fallen asleep. And he knew this trial wasn't a test. It was a trap. But he also knew something they didn't. You don't win trust with force. You earn it, one fragile heart at a time. The chamber they brought him to was older than the rest of the dreadnought, older than the war itself. Its walls weren't polished or plated. They were carved, etched with the forgotten bones of languages. Nobody in the court dared to speak anymore. The floor gleamed like oil-stained glass, but not from polish. From history. Layers of it. Sealed and scrubbed and sealed again, trying to hide what couldn't be erased. Cole stood in the center, surrounded by a circle of torches that burned without fuel. Not one alien present looked at him like he belonged. They watched him the way one watches a fly land on a relic, more insult than threat. A voice rang out. Amplified, ceremonial, "Begin the trial." And then silence. No task, no opponent, just waiting. Cole squinted at the floor. He could feel something in it, a residue of meaning, pressed between the seams. He stepped forward. One step, then another. His boots echoed like apologies. There was no weapon offered, no instructions given, just a room, an audience, and an expectation. Fail. He looked around, at the ornate architecture, the cracked corners, the rivulets of dust clinging to carvings no one bothered to clean. So he did what he knew. He reached for the mop. It had been handed back to him wordlessly, a joke in someone's eyes, a symbol of his status. But to Cole, it was something else. It was his craft. He dipped it into the small, half-filled bucket they'd left at the edge of the chamber. The aliens murmured, "What is he doing?" Mocking the right. He doesn't even know where he is. But he did. Not the name, not the purpose, but the feeling. The floor was telling him. He moved the mop in slow, deliberate arcs. Not random swipes, not aimless motion. He traced loops, breaks, fractures, closures. Not art, not rebellion, just cleaning. Cleaning until the pattern revealed itself. And then it did, faintly, like breath on glass. 3 slashed lines. One broken, one whole, one crossed with a meteor tail. Gasps burst like fireworks. A scribe stumbled to his feet. "That's Meridian." "No," another snapped. "It's forbidden." But the floor had responded. Where his mop passed, the stone shimmered. Lines deepened, connecting, pulsing faintly with something the room had forgotten: memory. Calix stepped forward, fury igniting his voice. "He defiles the trial." The Empress stood, but she didn't speak. She watched. Not him. The sigil. Cole kept moving. His mop danced like a pen in practiced fingers. And when the pattern was finished, it hummed. Not with power, with truth. Uncomfortable, unforgiving, undeniable. And every being in that room, strategist, judge, guard, scribe, felt the same thing at once. He wasn't writing history. He was revealing it. The chamber stood still, as if the walls themselves were holding breath. The sigil glowed softly beneath Cole's mop, its edges pulsing like a memory trying to return. No one moved. No one spoke. Until a low voice broke the tension. "Meridian," whispered the scribe again. This time, The word carried. Delegates stirred, eyes widened. Others shook their heads, quietly, nervously. That order was destroyed centuries ago. They were archivists, spat another. Cleaners of relics, not lawmakers. They were traitors. Cole stood in the middle of it all, gripping his mop handle like an anchor. He didn't know what Meridian truly was. He didn't need to. The floor had spoken, and his hands had remembered. That was enough. But then, speak the word. Caelix snarled, his voice full of triumph. If you claim their mark, speak it. Prove you know what you've drawn. It was a trap, a setup for public failure. Cole looked down at the sigil. The baby's cry echoed again in the back of his mind, soft and haunting. And from somewhere deep inside, deeper than grief, deeper than memory, he spoke. The word wasn't human. It wasn't shaped for earthborn mouths. But he said it anyway, syllables curling like smoke from a forgotten fire. Vishalan. The torches dimmed, the sigil flared, and the chamber gasped as one, because the word was real, ancient, forbidden, alive. No outsider should know that, a general barked. Caelix's armor clicked as he stepped forward, weapon now unholstered. He's stolen knowledge. No, came another voice. Everyone turned. The Empress. Her gaze was not on the sigil, it was on Cole. You didn't read that word, she said softly. You remembered it. Cole swallowed. He didn't understand it himself. He only knew that when the baby touched him, something opened. Something began to speak. Not in words, in feeling, in memory. She trusted me, he said. And when she did, it came back. Caelix scoffed. Lies. He's manipulating the air, poisoning her. She slept, the Empress said again, sharper now. And she has never slept since the breach. That word breach hung heavy. A moment passed, then another, and then a pulse deep, resonant, thrummed through the floor. The sigil reacted. A second symbol rose from the stone. Fainter, inverted. A response. The chamber reeled. It's recognizing him, whispered the scribe. It's calling him back. Impossible. Caelix spat. He's a human, a janitor. But the Empress was no longer looking at the floor. She was looking at his eyes, and she saw it now. Not ambition, not rebellion, not even hope. Recognition. The same look her late mate wore when he used to hum that old Meridian lullaby. The one their daughter hadn't responded to until today. Because Cole hadn't hummed it. He'd spoken its origin. She should have killed him. That's what the protocol dictated. That's what the court expected. A breach of bloodline sanctity was punishable by death. Instant, unquestioned, absolute. And yet the Empress stood unmoving, her crown dimmed to a faint flicker, her war armor now too heavy on her skin, because she knew that word. Vishalan. She had heard it once, long ago, in a time she had buried beneath centuries of conquest. A time when the stars still felt like places to learn from, not scorch. When a woman with silver in her hair and fire in her voice had knelt before the tribunal of old and sworn the Meridian oath. Truth in dust, memory in motion, peace by the quietest hand. The same woman who had taught her how to hold a child without fear. The same woman who had vanished when the wars began. And now a human, a janitor, had spoken that word aloud, traced that glyph, cradled her child as if bound not by accident but by inheritance. She looked at Cole, really looked. There was nothing regal about him. His uniform was patched with crude thread. His boots didn't match. His hands were calloused, fingers stained with years of quiet labor. He looked like every forgotten worker she had crushed beneath ambition. And yet, the child had slept, and that meant more than any decree. Caelix stepped forward, his voice a hiss. My Empress, we must not fall to sentiment. The trial must proceed. The sigil could be replicated, the word stolen. He must be punished. But the Empress barely heard him. She was staring at Cole's face, at the faint scar above his brow, a jagged crescent, like a broken moon. She'd seen that scar before, not in person, in a report, decades ago, classified above all others, a covert mission to Terra, an extraction that failed, a child listed missing, presumed dead, a name, Elias Colin Ward, son of Myra Ward, last of the Meridian custodians. her voice caught in her throat, because she had given the order that day. She had watched the feed without flinching. She had called it necessary. And now, her daughter, her only child, slept in the arms of the very legacy she tried to erase. Tried, but did not succeed. Calyx raised his weapon. This ends now. He stepped toward Cole. The Empress moved. One hand, one motion, and Calyx flew backward, slammed against the far wall with a force that cracked the stone. Gasps erupted, but no one moved, because she wasn't just protecting a man. She was protecting a memory, her own, the one she had buried, drowned, burned, but could not kill. The baby stirred, eyes fluttered, and when they opened, they glowed not just with light, but with recognition of the man who held her, and the woman who had once believed in something softer than victory. And for the first time in her reign, the Empress whispered not to her court, nor her army, but to herself. I thought I erased them all, but memory, she now knew, was never truly erased, only waiting to be held again. No one knew what to say. The chamber, once built to house declarations of conquest and blood oath ceremonies, stood frozen under the weight of something it had never been asked to contain: reverence. But not for the Empress, not for the generals, for the janitor. Cole didn't move. He hadn't since the Empress shielded him from Calyx's charge. His mop leaned quietly against the wall behind him. The baby slept in the cradle now just a few feet away, her tiny chest rising and falling like a tether, keeping him steady. He didn't want power. He didn't want justice. He just wanted her safe. The sigil he'd mopped into the floor still glowed, but now a second glyph had bloomed beneath it, less precise, almost like a signature drawn in grief. A meridian mourning mark, a symbol that hadn't been seen since the fall of the old alliances. The Empress stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. Her crown hummed above her brow like a living star, shards of crystal orbiting just slightly off-center, unsteady, like her breath. "Do you know what that symbol means?" she asked, voice low. Cole shook his head. "Only that it felt necessary." She nodded. Not in condescension, in recognition. "I darred. It's what we used to carve over graves," she said, when words were too loud to say goodbye. Behind her, the court watched in horrified silence as the Empress, breaker of worlds, silencer of rebellion, removed her crown. No fanfare, no announcement. She took it off and knelt. The gasp that followed didn't come from one mouth, but from all of them, as if the chamber itself had just realized the center of gravity had shifted. She set the crown on the floor between them, not in surrender, in offering. "Your mother saved my life once," she said. "She taught me that mercy isn't the absence of strength, it's the most terrifying form of it." Cole's eyes flicked to the baby, still asleep, still at peace. "I didn't save anyone," he said. "I just picked her up." The Empress looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, her face held something no one in that court had ever seen. Not fear, not arrogance, gratitude. "You remembered a word," she said. "But more than that, you remembered how to hold. This galaxy has forgotten both." The chamber rippled with confusion. Counselors murmured. Strategists shifted, unsure what came next. Calyx groaned in the distance, half-conscious, still pinned under the weight of his own fury. And then quietly, without ceremony, Cole bent down. He didn't touch the crown. He placed his mop beside it. Two tools, side by side. One forged for rule, one for cleaning up what rule leaves behind. And the room, for the first time in its history, bowed, not to hierarchy, not to fear, to a man who had proven that dignity was not a title, it was a choice, made quietly, over and over again. He didn't stay to savor it, didn't bask in the silence that now rippled with reverence, didn't raise his chin or soak in the astonished stares of the generals who once wouldn't have paused if they'd stepped on him. Cole simply turned back to the child still curled in her cradle, one tiny hand resting beside her cheek, the faint remnants of a smile on her alien lips. The Empress rose slowly behind him, her crown still resting untouched on the floor beside the mop. She said nothing. She didn't need to, because something had shifted in her, not her power. That remained untouched, but her posture, her silence had softened, not like weakness, but like someone who had finally exhaled after carrying breath too long. "Where will you go now?" she asked him. Cole shrugged gently, eyes still on the baby. "Where I'm needed. And if I asked you to stay?" He paused, then turned. "I'll stay as long as she sleeps." The Empress's mouth trembled, not in grief but in awe. The court, still watching, didn't speak. They didn't dare. They had seen a trial turn into a memory, and a memory into something sacred. The tribunal eye above the chamber blinked once, its neural web glowing softly. For the first time in generations, it didn't scan for threats. It recorded peace. A small scribe, a Veari girl with nervous hands, stepped forward. She clutched a tablet close to her chest. "Sir," she said gently, "the glyphs you traced, they weren't just meridian. They were active. They've rekeyed the archive vaults. We think," she hesitated, "we think the floor recognized you as custodian." Cole glanced down. The pattern was fading, absorbed back into the obsidian, but the imprint of it remained, visible only if you'd ever mopped a floor long enough to memorize its scars. "I didn't mean to activate anything," he said. "That's the point," the Empress said. "Real custodians never do." He nodded once, then turned, collecting the mop in one hand, the bucket in the other. He walked the length of the chamber, each footstep slow, measured, quiet, not like a conqueror, not like a judge, but like someone finishing a shift. At the threshold, he paused. The child stirred again. Cole didn't look back, but his voice, when it came, was soft enough that only those who had learned to listen with their hearts could hear it. "Keep the floor clean," he said. "That's where all stories start." And then he stepped into the corridor, leaving behind a room transformed not by violence or decree, but by something much harder to summon: truth remembered. The mop clinked lightly against the bucket. The sigil faded completely, and the court would never be the same, because they had seen what happens when the galaxy stops chasing crowns and finally notices the hands that kept it standing.